What's number what? All right, so some of the answers to and I'm just gonna skip around to what's actually gonna be on the test. We went over types of communication, but we did not go over the communication process. That had a bunch of the answers in there. All right, so our objectives are to describe and use the sender-receiver communication model, employ active listening skills, recognize other effective communication skills. So communication is a process. The sender-receiver model is a way to break down the process into steps. This model can be used together with active listening skills to create effective communication. All right, so the sender-receiver model includes a sender, receiver, and a message. So you got somebody that's going to send, somebody's going to receive, and the actual message that's being received. So other elements include frame of reference and feedback. The sender is a person who encodes or gives information. The receiver is a person who decodes or accepts the information. The message is the information that is being communicated. So you need to know that the sender is the person who provides information. The sender is the person that provides information. Oh, you ain't come my class again with no paper. And you messing up the screen. What? I said she won't let me go. You need to take your stuff with you. Don't be blaming other folks. You need to have your stuff with you. You need to have something with it. Paper, pencil. Oh. All right, so in a working model, the sender gives a message, the receiver accepts the message and decodes the message or on his or her frame of reference or experiences and values. The receiver gives a response called feedback. The sender then interrupts the feedback based on his or her own frame of reference. This confirms to the sender whether or not the original message was received properly. So you need to know that the receiver, how it decodes the message, is to apply their own frame of reference. So basically, the answer to number 4 on your study guide is apply their own frame of reference. Frame of reference. Frame of reference. The answer to number 4 on the study guide is apply their own frame of reference.
Alright, so tell me what's important in this problem. The whole thing's important? No, what's important in this problem?
You got a chicken and pass. Why? Why? You come from that way. You come from chicken.
It's not
Huh?
What time is that?
7:51. 7:45. Y'all gonna check in. School started at 7:30. It's January. Y'all act like y'all still clueless on that fact.
Case study. Tyra.
Alright, Tyra and Keisha are sisters. They're discussing their chores. Tyra is scheduled to set the table for dinner every night that week, while Keisha is scheduled to clear the table during the week. Tyra would like to trade chores with Keisha. So Tyra asks, "Did you see our chores for this week?" Keisha says yes. Tyra says, "Would you be willing to trade chores with me? I want to volunteer at the animal shelter this week after school. If I do, I won't get home in time to set the table for dinner." So Keisha says, so I would set the table this week and you would clear it? Yes. Will that be okay with you? Keisha says, that's okay. And then Tyra says, thanks. All right, so in this case study, who is the sender? So Tyra is the sender, so who's the receiver? Which quote is an example of feedback? Which quote is an example of the message? All right, so on this model, what goes where? Receiver next blue box, message at the top. All right, so you got your message, you got your sender, receiver, and then feedback.
Active listening skills.
All right, so active listening is another part of the communication process. Listening is paying attention to hear what the sender is saying. So good listeners have these skills in common. They show interest, there are alerts, they maintain eye contact, avoid interrupting, they pay attention, avoid thinking ahead for a response, try to ignore personal prejudices, ignore distractions by moving to a quiet place, watch the speaker closely for nonverbal contradictions, and then maintain a positive attitude.
Restatement.
All right, so among other listening skills, active listening also involves reflection, restatement, and clarification. Restatement involves repeating the message back to the sender in the receiver's own words. For example, a patient explains that she has a headache. Healthcare worker responds, "You say you have a headache." Restatement verifies that the correct message has been heard and understood. So your patient's telling you about their headache, you kind of, it's like you're repeating it back to them that you have a headache. Um, Reflection involves responding with empathy. For example, a patient explains and shows the healthcare worker that he has a splinter in his palm. Healthcare worker responds sincerely, "Oh yes, I can see the splinter. They are really painful, aren't they?" So you need to know that reflection involves responding with empathy. It's the active listening technique that involves empathy is reflection.
Good morning, everyone. Today is Monday, January the 10th. Just want to wish everyone a good morning. Students, as you know, we are in the last week of the second 9 weeks. So if teachers allow you this, just make sure you communicate with your teachers, turn in all your assignments, and completing them on time, because Friday is the end of the grading period. When we come back next week, we will start the first week of the third 9 weeks. Jeff Davis is to provide and ensure a safe and caring community which focuses on high-level learning and positive relationships amongst teachers, students, parents, and community members. We will be a nurturing, safe, and professional environment that supports the educational success and social, emotional, and physical development of all students. My motto is preparing tomorrow's leaders today. Our theme is everyone believes. We believe in you, and also I know you guys are believing in your talents and your skills yourself. So now it's time to put those things in action. So we're gonna continue to show you that we believe, and let's show us. I want you guys, students, to show us you do believe in yourself. You have a confidence in yourself to do things the right way. The JD way, things we don't do, we don't fight. We're not going to disrespect our teachers, and we're most definitely not going to bring alcohol, drugs, or guns, or weapons to school. Some of those instances has taken place, and we have dealt with those swiftly, and we'll continue to deal with those as they arise. But most importantly, don't do those things. Of course, we're still focused on you as the student learner. Also, we're going to continue to prove ourselves as professionals and create a culture and climate to where you can come in, feel safe, and learn the content that's being taught to you. Teachers, we will have a faculty meeting tomorrow at 3 o'clock. It'll be online. Things we'll discuss, we'll look at the ACES, Alabama Continuous Improvement Plan for Jeff Davis. And we'll also look at the ATOP, which is the new teacher observation tool that we would have to use when we're doing observations. So those were sent to you, so make sure you familiarize yourself with those forms, especially the observation form, and then we will meet tomorrow and we'll go over those things. If you have duty, teachers, especially in the morning, make sure you're here. Make sure you're here on time. You need to be here at 7 o'clock if you have duty. We let our kids in the building at 7:05. So if you have duty, which the schedule was sent out last week, I'll resend it to you again. Just check that, and especially in the morning. We need you here on time. So if you have duty in the morning, make sure you're here at 7 o'clock. We'll release the students through the checkpoint at 7:05. Basketball travels to Enterprise Tuesday. A big area matchup for our girls and boys, so we're wishing them good luck. If you haven't had a chance to go out and support the teams, please do so. They're playing great basketball. They're believing in themselves. Coaches are believing in them. And they're going out there and putting that belief into practice. So great job with them. Friday as well. Friday is, we will host Murphy High School as of now. So if you're able to come out and support the basketball teams on Friday, please do so. Just a reminder, teachers, grading period ends Friday. Grades are due Monday. We will come back Tuesday after the holiday, and we'll take the next appropriate steps to get ready to prepare our report cards to be distributed Thursday so our kids can take them home. So just make sure this week you're finalizing those things, doing what you need to do in order to be able to have those grades in and report cards printed up next week. All right, teachers and students, have a great day.
Alright, so clarification occurs when a receiver asks questions to get a more concise explanation or to clear up any confusion about the message. For example, a child patient complains that her belly hurts. The healthcare worker responds, "Can you point on your belly exactly where it hurts?" That's for like clarification purposes. So you need to know that clarification is an active listening technique that involves asking questions to get a more concise explanation. So clarification is the active listening technique that involves asking questions to get a more concise explanation.
So when you're doing this, that's what you're gonna do. You're gonna multiply by everything inside. Got it? So you're gonna multiply 8 times 8, 8 times 5. Your variable stays. So in that case, you're gonna get what? 8 times 4, 8, gonna get what? 32, 8 times 5, gonna get what? 40. So your answer will be 32, 8 plus 40. What's the number? Anything complicated with this? Okay, so that's what you're doing with the distributive property. You just multiply the number on the outside times everything on the inside. Now turn that back over. Simplified expressions. That's what you're doing. You simplify variable expressions. This is when you're combining like terms. So if you want to write on that sheet, combining like terms, because that's what it means. Simplify variable expressions is combining like terms. That means the variable has to be the same in every way, right? So if you look at this little problem, it gets a little bit complicated when you get to number 16. Start taking it. You get problem 16, what do you need to do first? You need to do your distributive problem first, then combine your like what? Terms. So 16, 22, you can know to yourself, you do distributive problem what? First, then combine like what? Terms. So make sure you understand that. Look at distributive property, combine like terms. When you get to 16, you got to do distributive property before you combine like what? Terms. Alright, go to your next sheet. Evaluating variable expressions. This way you're gonna put stuff together. So they're telling you what the variable is equal to. You just gonna find the answer.
Active listening involves reflection, restatement, and clarification. Which active listening technique involves empathy? Which active listening technique involves asking questions to get a more concise explanation? Repeating a message back to the sender in the receiver's own words. Responding with empathy. Asking questions to get a more concise or clear explanation is clarification.
Other effective communication.
Alright, so not all communication skills involve listening. There are other skills that enhance communication. So you should be conscious of your own body language, including your posture and your eye contact. Avoid any display of anger. Speak slowly, softly, and clearly. Which of the following is a communication skill? All of them. So avoiding displays of anger, speaking slowly and softly, and being conscious of body language. Alright. Let's see. We did all those. I think.
What you'll learn.
Alright, so we're going to look at interaction, communication with patients, explain the importance of effective patient interaction, and state the stages of patient interaction.
Patient interaction.
So, interacting with patients is a part of most healthcare workers' jobs. Feeling confident, comfortable, and competent during patient interaction takes practice and experience. After all, healthcare workers must communicate effectively with patients while also trying to accurately assess their health status. Patient interaction involves several stages. You have preparation, introduction, assessment, treating, and monitoring, then feedback and follow-up. Which of the following should occur at the end of a patient interaction? Alright, feedback and follow-up.
Preparation.
Healthcare workers should take a moment to prepare before entering the hospital room or the exam room. They should take this moment to review the patient's chart. They should familiarize themselves with the name, health history, and the chief complaint. The chief complaint is a reason the patient is acquiring medical help. Charts also give healthcare workers critical information about any special needs or precautions concerning the patient. So they should kind of know a little bit about you before, at least your name, what you're there for, before they walk in the room. And like when you go to the doctor, like if you go to the emergency room, they'll ask you why you're there. That's gonna be your chief complaint. So if you're having like you broke your foot or abdominal pain or something like that, that's gonna be your chief complaint, the reason that you're there. Now you might have other stuff going on, but the reason that you came to the doctor or you came to the emergency room, that's gonna be your chief complaint. So they should know, and then they're gonna come in and start asking a bunch of questions, try to figure out, what's going on.
Introduction.
All right, so first impressions last. So healthcare workers must be conscious of how they present themselves when they greet a patient. Healthcare workers should enter the room calmly and formally introduce themselves to the patient. They should give their name, position, and their purpose for being there. Perhaps more important than the actual words is the manner in which they are delivered. Healthcare workers should leave any bad feelings behind before entering a patient's room. Patients can easily sense a negative or artificial manner. Their initial reception of a healthcare worker can affect their feelings towards that person for the rest of their association. So, when you go into a patient's room, what's the first thing you need to do? Introduce yourself. So you need to write it down. You go into a patient's room, first thing you need to do is to introduce yourself.
Assessment.
Because who wants somebody to just bust up in there and then don't say nothing? Don't tell them who you are. Don't tell them what you're doing, where you're from. All right, so assessment is when a healthcare worker makes observations and evaluates a patient's condition. The healthcare worker is looking for signs that can shed light on the patient's health status. These signs can include patient's appearance and color, personality, attitude, reaction to the healthcare worker's presence. Assessment also includes vital signs. Healthcare workers' ability to assess and observe a patient improves with experience.
Please excuse this announcement. I need the following students to report to the main office: Chavez Jackson and Delilah Martin. Chavez Jackson and Delilah Martin, please report to the main office.
So you need to know that assessment involves the healthcare worker looking for signs that can shed light on the patient's health status. So assessment involves the healthcare worker looking for signs that can shed light on the patient's health status. That's assessment.
Excuse me, teachers and students. Hey, teachers, coming from Ms. Harris. She says she knows that the check-in pad has the wrong date. She says it's her mistake. She picked up the wrong ones, but it is correct. She did give it to the kids. So go ahead and allow the kids in class today with the pad. She says she'll be back on schedule tomorrow. Thank you.
Treating and
Alright, so treating a patient involves reading and following a doctor's orders. Before treating a patient, the healthcare worker should describe the procedure in lay terms and explain why it is being done and what it should accomplish. When treating a patient, healthcare workers should encourage the patient and give positive reinforcement. Healthcare workers must constantly monitor the patient, looking for any signs of change, good or bad. If the patient is suddenly doing bad, the healthcare worker should stop the treatment and get help.
feedback and follow.
After completing treatment for patients, healthcare workers should assess the patient again. They should ask patients how they're feeling, take vital signs. Then healthcare workers should give patients feedback about the treatments. They should let patients know how well they performed and give any pointers or tips about getting better results the next time. Healthcare workers should be sure to leave patients on a positive note by thanking them, wishing them well, and reminding them of when they should return. After leaving patients, healthcare workers must be diligent about documenting what took place. Which part of patient interaction involves a healthcare worker looking for signs that can shed light on the patient's health status? So that's them physically looking at you, probably taking your blood pressure, taking your pulse, respiration, oxygen level. That's what an assessment is. Which part of patient interaction involves a healthcare worker letting patients know how well they performed and giving pointers about getting better results the next time? Feedback and follow up. So from what you presented with, what your symptoms were, what your, like, they did blood work, they did x-rays, whatever they did, they're going to look at all that to see if they can come up with a diagnosis for you and what you need to, like medicine or therapy or whatever you need to, do to get better. Which part of patient interaction involves a healthcare worker into the room calmly and formally introducing themselves to the patient? Introduction. Which part of patient interaction involves the healthcare worker describing the procedure in lay terms and explaining why it's being done and what it should accomplish? Like treatment and preparation. Right.
Lesson summary.
I think it's something. So, let's see.
What you'll learn. After you finish this lesson, you will be able. What you'll learn.
Alright, so we're going to talk about documentation, the items included in the health history, and then we're not going to complete a patient health history. probably do that later on this week.
Types of documentation.
Alright, so there are many types of documentation and they vary from one agency to another. Some forms of documentation are fairly standard. They include health histories, notes, initial evaluations, progress reports, and discharge reports. In the past, documentation was always done by hand. Now, practice management software allows documentation to be done on the computer. All healthcare agencies are different. Healthcare workers should be familiar with keeping documentation by hand and on the computer. So, they had, before I left working at the bedside, we started charting in computers. So, I'm sure they're a little bit more advanced now because it's been 5 years, but we would chart. We still had patient charts, but everything would come off like electronically. You can put stuff in the computer. So I'm not really sure what they do now, but probably maybe still do both. Who knows? But you can still look at like your medical records. You should be able to assess them like digitally on a computer as well to see like your lab work, your any kind of reports and stuff like that. Documentation may vary from one agency to another, but some forms of documentation are fairly standard. Documentation must always be done by hand.
Health histories. Perhaps.
Alright, so the most standard document in the healthcare industry is a patient health history or medical history. This health history is typically completed on a patient's first visit to a doctor. So, like if you're a new patient, if you're going to a doctor for the first time, they usually have like new patient paperwork. So that's what they're trying to get is your health history. Any surgeries you had, any medication that you're on, stuff like that. It can be completed by the patient alone or by a healthcare worker and the patient together. The information included in the health history is confidential and should be treated sensitively. This document provides the doctor with important information about the patient. The doctor uses it to make a diagnosis and prescribe treatment. Most health histories contain the same type of information, including but not limited to the following. So you have general statistical data that includes your name,
Chief
address,
complaint.
phone number,
CC. The chief.
and other relevant data such as employment and health insurance information. Then you have your chief complaint. That's the reason for seeking medical help. The chief complaint should be recorded in the patient's own words and closed with quotation marks. For patients who are getting a routine physical and have no chief complaint, the healthcare worker should record something similar to the following. Patient states that he is getting a physical examination and has no complaints.
Health histories.
Alright, so then you have your present illness or your PI. Present illness is a detailed description of the patient's chief complaints. The healthcare worker should note what the patient has done for the symptoms, the treatment has helped, how long the patient has been experiencing the symptoms, the patient has experienced the symptoms before, and any over-the-counter or OTC medication the patient has taken. So, if you are taking ibuprofen for pain or you're taking something for asthma, is it helping? Is it not helping? Because they might want to switch you to a different medication. They might want to increase your dose of whatever you're currently on. So they're going to try to see how you're presenting at that time during that actual visit. Then they have review of systems. A review of systems is a review of all the body systems to uncover problems that the patient is not aware of. So a lot of times they'll have like, let me see if it's going to light up. Yeah.
Review of systems.
Not a good picture, but it'll have like all the different body systems, like your lungs, your skin, your digestive, your GI, and they'll ask you, are you having this problem? And you just check it off, or you put no, because they want to see, if there's anything else that could be going on that contributes to what you're presenting with. Your past history includes any major illnesses, surgeries, injuries, allergies, and unusual childhood diseases that the patient may have. Dates of these incidents or the age of the patient when the incidents occurred should also be included. Past history should also document patient immunizations and medications. So it's important to know what's in your past medical history. Of course, your parents might have a better, understanding of what you had going on when you were younger. You probably, didn't know. But, try to keep up with, if you had surgery, if you broke a arm one time, or you had to have tonsils removed, or stuff like that.
Health history.
All right, family history. So family history should include the past and present health of the patient's biological mother, father, and siblings. If any of these family members are deceased, the age and cause of death should be recorded. Some things are like biological. So some diseases, if your parents had it, you're more than likely you have an increased risk of having those things. So they want to know, like, does your family have a history of high blood pressure? Does your family have a history of diabetes? Because if it's in your family history, then a lot of times you're at a more increased risk of having those same like diseases, disorders, or whatever. So you might not know everything about your family, but you should at least know. Ask your parent, your grandma, ask somebody. We got this in the family, so you'll have a better understanding of what kind of diseases, disorders that you might have. Both my parents have diabetes. I don't currently have diabetes, but I did have what's called gestational diabetes that you have when you're pregnant. So because of that, I have increased risk of having diabetes later. But like gestational is just that. It's like as soon as the baby was out, I was done with it. But the whole time she was in, which I had it with my last child, I had blood sugar problems, had to take medicine, had to watch what I ate, had to take my blood sugar before and after every meal. Like it was like I had diabetes my whole life, had to do all that stuff. As soon as I had her, it's like it was over with. I had to take no medicine, didn't have to take my blood sugar, everything normal out.
Did you know before, like,
Yeah, they
you got
test.
pregnant, or was it like?
No, they test you at a certain week.
Oh.
It's 2 different tests they do. The first one, I don't think you can have anything to eat or drink. You have to drink this stuff, and they'll take your blood in like an hour. And then if you fail that one, you have to take one that's 3 hours. So I failed that one, and then I had to take the 3 hour one. So they like check your blood every hour. And then if you fail that one, then you got gestational diabetes. So it's determined by the stuff that you drink, which tastes like nasty. I mean, it's like flattened soda or something like that. But
That's not bad.
no, it's nasty. Especially when you're pregnant, it's gross. But you drink it, and then they take your blood to see how it reacts to whatever's in there, the ingredients or whatever. So with my 16-year-old, I flunked the first one, but I didn't flunk the second one. So I barely passed it. But this one I had it. So psychosocial history. Psychosocial history includes the patient's personal life history. That's a question. Psychosocial history is a part of health history that includes information about the patient's lifestyle. So, lifestyle information, psychosocial history. So, in this section, it has like your diet, exercise, use of tobacco, consumption of alcohol. For women, psychosocial history should also include the number of pregnancies, number of children, any abortions, and menstrual cycle issues. So they'll ask you like, do you smoke? Do you drink? How many times, if you're a woman, how many times you've been pregnant? How many times you actually had a kid? So sometimes people have miscarriage and stuff like that. So you might have been pregnant twice, but only have one kid or whatever. So they'll ask you all these things just to try to get understanding. And people they'll lie. Like a lot of times when we have patients that will have surgery, they don't drink, but then you get them in there and they start acting crazy because they ain't had a drink since yesterday. Now you cold turkey because you having surgery, major surgery on your heart. Now you going through detox because you lied and said you don't drink, but you just stopped yesterday. You had to come for surgery. Or they'll say they don't smoke. Oh, I quit. Yeah, you quit the day of surgery because as I'm suctioning you out, I'm getting all this black stuff out of your lungs. Yes, you do smoke. They lie. They'll lie. And even though, I mean, if you gonna do it, own up to it. Let them know because it could determine what kind of treatment, like something, like we know somebody is a drunk and we need, because we give beer, we'll give beer to them if they're going to go through some kind of detox. Because that's something we don't want to deal with. They get crazy when they don't have their drug of choice sometimes. So we need to know these things so we'll know how to handle it. If you go in there and don't say nothing and we thinking something, but no, then your family come in, well, he does drink this every day, and we're like, oh, well, he told us he didn't do any of that stuff. So now we're looking crazy. So if you drink, if you smoke, you going in for surgery, some kind of procedure, let them know so they'll know what they're working with. If you're allergic to medicine, let them know. We don't want to give you something that's going to react with, what you're allergic to. Because some people take stuff or have, diseases or whatever where they can't have certain things. So that's why you should be aware of what you got going on. Now, if you just don't know, you don't know. But, if you do know, let it be known so they'll understand what's happening. A new health history form is typically completed during every patient visit to a doctor. Oh. Which part of a health history includes information about the patient's lifestyle?
Psychosocial history.
So you got psychosocial history. Which part of a health history includes information about the patient's reason for seeking medical help? Chief complaint. Which part of a health history includes information that is confidential?
All of the above.
All right. Because a person's medical records, that's confidential. You don't want, like, that's not information. I can't just be like, oh, here's a whole medical history. I can't do it. You can't just look at other people's stuff. You have to have permission, written permission from the patient. And if you're a healthcare worker, you're only supposed to be privy to the information of the patient, your patients. You're not supposed to be I'm not supposed to be in her chart. She's not on my list. I'm not supposed to have. Just because I know her don't mean I know what's going on with her. So that's against like HIPAA laws and stuff like that. So, and then you can't just like go and say, oh, I saw Cameron at the hospital. I don't know what's going on with her. I can't. You're not supposed to. That's confidential information. You're not supposed to tell. You can't go home and tell your boyfriend, girlfriend that whoever got this and this going on.
SOAP notes.
All right, so SOAP notes. SOAP is an acronym for Subjective Objective Assessment Plan. SOAP notes consistently contain information on these 4 areas. When the agency uses SOAP notes, then all employees know where to look for information and in what format they will find it. These notes eliminate some excess writing and reading for healthcare workers. Alright, so the purpose of the benefit of using SOAP notes is because all employees know where to look for information. All employees know where to look for information. That is the benefit of using SOAP notes.
teachers, your grade should be finalized at this time, but if it's not, please let me know because I'm going to run my verification reports right now. So if you're not done, please shoot me a text, call me, something, to let me know that you're not done. At this time, all of our ninth school grades, should be inputted into Power Schools, but if that's not the fact for your individual situation, please let me know now via email, text, or phone call. Thank you.
So if you look over here on their example that they gave you, they say that a patient's complaining of pain in his or her right leg. They're not able to put weight on that leg. So they did like an exam on them. So they saw that it was tender, swollen. So I think they're suggesting that it might be a fracture, which is a break. So they're gonna send them to X-ray to confirm that it's a break, and then immobilize as needed. So that's like their SOAP note. So you can go in and see, like, what's happening. See who has seen them, what they recommend, what the plan, and all that stuff is.
Narrative.
So narrative tells a patient's story. The advantage of the narrative method is that healthcare workers can describe how patient status, treatment, etc. has changed. With SOAP notes, there is not a category for changes, and so healthcare workers will need to read all of the notes to determine what change has occurred. Narrative notes occur in chronological order as the events take place. The disadvantage of this method is that it can be more time consuming than the SOAP method. So this is how like we'll chart. So you have your date, your time, and then whoever they gave them whatever, gave them some Tylenol, and then they'll put their initials and their credentials, which is RN. So and it goes like in order. So the first one, and it goes like behind everybody. So if I was to come in as a respiratory therapist, give them a breathing treatment, and I'll put the date, the time, gave them blah 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 blah, and I'll put R here and RRT or whatever. So those are the narrative notes. So you can go back and look and see like everything that's been done. Which type of notes occur in chronological order as the events take place? Narrative. Which type of note is written in specific format so that employees know where to look for information? SOAP notes.
Initial evaluation.
So initial evaluation is the groundwork for a patient's file. An initial evaluation includes an assessment of the patient's condition, plan for treatment, and the goals for recovery. Specifically, an initial evaluation includes patient identification, referrals, reason for the referral, the history, the diagnosis, requested treatment, and complicating factors, the evaluation, diagnosis with rationale for treatment, treatment plan, prescriptions, follow-up appointments, frequency and duration, and goals.
Progress report.
Progress report contains information regarding a patient's ongoing treatment and progress and care. Progress reports occur over a specified length of time, which can be days, weeks, months, etc. Purpose of a progress report is to support, give evidence of the need for the patient's continued medical care. Notes in a progress report can be written in either the SOAP or narrative format. Progress report should contain the patient info, current evaluation, their diagnosis, so that's a review of the original diagnosis and then addressing any new diagnoses. Treatment, what was accomplished and what has occurred. Assessment, patient's reaction to the treatment, so how they responded to whatever was given or done. Any complications, so that's problems, if they reacted to something, reacted to medicine, what happened, and then recommendations, changes, and goals. So suggestions or changes for treatment, new short and long-term goals, follow-up schedule.
Discharge report.
A discharge report has two functions. It releases the patient back to their regular lifestyle, sometimes with some restrictions. It also gives a record of the interactivity among healthcare providers as it documents the patient's success from the initial evaluation to release. So I need to know that the discharge report releases the patient back to their regular lifestyle. Watch on today. That'd be crazy. Which type of documentation has a purpose of supporting and giving evidence of the need for the patient's continued medical care? Right. Which type of documentation has a purpose of releasing the patient back to their regular lifestyle and giving a record of the interactivity among healthcare providers? Discharge. Which type of documentation has a purpose of assessing the patient's condition, planning for treatment, and contains the goals for recovery?
Complete lesson summary.
What?
All right. So last part of documentation is reporting. Define documentation and its standards. List standards of documentation. Differentiate between fact and opinion. Describe how to properly document subjective and objective information. Explain how to elicit information from patients and state the importance of confidentiality.
Documentation.
Documentation is perhaps the most critical communication that a healthcare worker will create. Medical documentation contains very specific and important information about patients, their health status, treatments, and goals.
Documentation.
All right, so when you document things that you should know, you need to double check for the correct patient, chart, and form. You don't want to be putting the wrong information on the wrong patient. Use a blue or black ink pen. We always just use black because black shows up when you have to photocopy stuff. So I always had a black pen. And it was, adjustment when I started working here using other colors, but black was all we ever were told to use. You need to write information neatly and in concise language. Use only abbreviations that are approved by the agency. Record items in chronological order. Record all activities. An item is not considered done until it is documented. So you can't do something and you can say you did it, but if you did not chart it, if it's not in the record, not in the notes, whatever, then it wasn't done. So you gotta make sure that you chart everything. Do not leave empty spaces between lines of data. Correct errors appropriately. If errors are made, the author should draw a single line through the error, write the word error, and initial it. Errors should never be erased or covered with correction fluid. So you can't use whiteout. You have to draw a line through it, put error, put your initials, and then you chart the way you should chart. Sign any information inserted into a patient file. Signatures should always include the author's name or initials, the position or title, and the date and time. When necessary, destroy documents properly using a paper shredder. We never threw people's medical records in the trash can. You have to put it in a well, they have shred boxes. Put it in a shred box because that has, confidential information on it. Documentation is perhaps the most critical communication that a healthcare worker will create because it contains very specific and important information about patients. Which of the following is a standard of documentation that should be followed by healthcare workers? Which one should you do? Right.
Fact.
When documenting or reporting patient information, healthcare workers must be careful to only include facts and to consider their own opinions. For example, I think Mr. Jones has a fever is an opinion. Mr. Jones has a temperature of 101 degrees Fahrenheit is a fact. To understand the difference between fact and opinion, it is helpful to distinguish between subjective and objective observations.
Subjective and
In the healthcare industry, subjective observations are often called symptoms. So you need to know that. Subjective observations are symptoms. They are not seen or felt. Instead, they are comments or complaints made by the patient. For example, a patient may say, I feel really warm. So you need to know subjective observations are symptoms. Objective observations are typically called signs. They can be measured or seen. For example, the patient may have a temperature reading of 102.5 degrees Fahrenheit. So your symptoms are how they tell you they feel. Your subjective observations. Objective observations are the actual measurements. Something that you can see, something that you can measure. So when they say your signs and symptoms, they're talking about your subjective and objective observations. So you just need to know that subjective observations are symptoms. What's another term from symptom? Another word for symptom. Subjective observation. Another term for sign. Objective. When documenting or reporting patient information, healthcare workers must be careful to include only facts and to consider their own opinions.
Making objective
During patient interaction, healthcare workers must constantly make observations. They must use all of their senses when observing patients. With the sense of sight, healthcare workers should watch for unusual color, skin color, swelling, rashes, sores. They should also take notice of unusual urine and stool color. They might also notice if abnormal quantities of food have been eaten or left on patient plates. With the sense of smell, healthcare workers should be aware of any body odor or unusual odors from the breath, urine, stools, or wounds. With the sense of touch, healthcare workers should pay attention to pulse and the condition of the skin, including temperature, swelling, dryness, or perspiration. With the sense of hearing, healthcare workers should listen to respirations and be alert for unusual body sounds, coughing, and impaired or slurred speech. All right, unusual skin color, swelling, rashes, or sores. Is that touch, hearing, sight, or smell? Body odor or unusual odors from the breath, urine, stools, or wounds. Pulse and the condition of the skin, including temperature, swelling, and dryness or perspiration. And then respirations, coughing, impaired or slurred speech is hearing.
documenting
Both subjective and objective observations have been placed in patient documentation. Objective observations should make up most of the report. These observations are based on factual data that result from a procedure or therapy that has been performed on or by the patient. Subjective statements made by the patient may also be included. However, they should be recorded in the patient's exact words and quotation marks should surround them. So I need to write that down. So subjective statement should be documented in exact words with quotation marks. Because that's what your patient is telling you. So quotation marks, exact words. All right, which of the following sentences should healthcare workers use when making observations? Which type of observations are based on factual data that results from procedure or therapy that has been performed on or by the patient? Subjective observations made by healthcare workers should be recorded in the patient's file.
eliciting information,
Healthcare workers must be skilled at eliciting information from patients In addition to being a good listener, healthcare workers must know how to ask the right questions in order to get the information that they require. They should ask broad questions that encourage patients to reply with more than yes or no. For example, when listening to information about a patient's chief complaint, healthcare worker might ask, "Why have you come to see the doctor today?" Once a patient gives an answer, the healthcare worker should continue to encourage the patient by asking, "What other symptoms do you have?"
Confidentiality.
Information that goes into a patient's file is confidential. Healthcare workers must be sensitive to that confidentiality. They should ask patients for personal information in a private environment. Additionally, they should be careful to close file folders before setting them down where someone else might see them. Which is a way of eliciting information from a patient? Information that goes into a patient's file should not be left where other people can read it because it is
Hey, Sarah.
morning.
Lesson summary.
Alright, I'm gonna let y'all take this quiz on documentation we just went over. I'm gonna open the laptop cart, so you can grab a Chromebook, a laptop real quick and take that quiz.
Why does school gonna be so early in the morning?
Not sure how to get school like that.
We use the note.
Huh?
We use the note.
You either know?
I thought we used it.
All right, if somebody gets done, then I got one more person that needs to, communication, documentation.
And I ain't said nobody's home. I ain't said nobody's